The views and opinions expressed in this podcast by the host and or the guest do not necessarily reflect the views of the host and or Paranormal Buzz Radio and or its sponsors. Use of any material produced by Paranormal Buzz Radio without express written consent is prohibited. Paranormal Buzz Radio will not be held responsible for you holding your knees, crying, and rocking in a corner in a puddle of your own urine, or being beheaded by a group of children in the cornfield. In fact, if you come across a group of children in a cornfield, we promise to make fun of you as you run away screaming in terror. Listener discretion is advised.
You're listening to RAP Paranormal and Friends with your hosts,
Kim Purvis
and Allison Robinson. Make sure to check us out on our Facebook pages, RAP Paranormal and Friends and RAP Paranormal Busters, for up-to-date show information and events. Hey everyone, welcome to another night of RAP Paranormal and Friends. We bring you a special guest tonight. I'm going to be talking a little bit about near-death experiences, but first let me give a little bit of an intro to our guest tonight. His name is Douglas Hodgson. He is a former dean and professor of law who is now residing in Australia. He also undertook postgraduate legal study at the University of London before embarking on like a 35-year career in higher education. He's been in Canada, Australia, and New Zealand as a teacher, researcher, scholar, human rights advocate, and university administrator. He has a new book out now called Spiritual Revelations from Beyond the Veil, What Humanity Can Learn from Near-Death Experiences. So please welcome Douglas to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, Allison, and greetings to your audience. And I'm looking forward to sharing my research findings with you.
Oh, yes, absolutely. The book was very interesting, but before we jump into some of the questions about your book, what got you interested in researching near-death experiences?
Well, in 1990 or thereabouts, I had occasion to read a previous edition of Dr. Raymond Moody's Life After Life. And I found it utterly fascinating, and I wanted to do more reading about the near-death experience, but being a busy university academic, you don't have much time for your own leisure or hobby reading.
Right.
So it was another, I think, almost 30 years when I retired from academia that I had more time to do my own leisure reading. And the first book I read was Dr. Eben Alexander's Proof of Heaven, a neurosurgeon's journey into the afterlife. Detailing in graphic detail his own near-death experience. And once again, I was utterly captivated and fascinated by the experience. And I really wanted to learn more about it. So I looked at the archives of the International Association for Near-Death Studies, the EANS as the acronym, and I started to read the written accounts of those people who had had an NDE and written about it. And the more I read, and I started to read dozens and dozens of accounts, the more I detected similar observations and themes and messaging. So I began, being a good university academic, to take copious notes and to collate this information under different headings. And then I started to come across written accounts where the NDEers say that the beings of light told them, you must now return to your physical bodies on Earth, and your mission is now to share what you have learned at the Veil and the messages and knowledge you have received with humanity, because the time is right. And the penny, it was a light bulb moment, Allison. I just knew this had to get out there, that my book would become a mouthpiece for some 500 people who have written about their near-death experiences and wanted to convey their messages to humanity.
And that's something, in just the last couple of years, it seems like we've done quite a few podcasts on this, whether they have had their own personal near-death experiences or they're researching it. Because, back maybe, 10 plus years ago, a lot of people kept that quiet because, people might think they're crazy or something. What do you think is causing people to feel more like they can come out and discuss this without being ridiculed or something about their experiences?
You're quite right. There has been a stigma attached to it. People are afraid to come out of the closet, as it were, and to share their experience. Because what they experienced, they found it very difficult to communicate in human language. They describe their episodes as ineffable or indescribable. And their earthbound experience just cannot relate to what they experienced in the higher spiritual realms. But I believe that stigma is dissipating slowly because of the publicity attached. So many now are writing on the near-death experience from various standpoints. Support groups are being set up not only in the USA, but in Britain, Australia, and other countries to help NDEers cope with it. Because trying to explain it to your close friends or loved ones, it's sometimes they're just not believed, or they can't understand what the NDEer experienced. But slowly I think that's dissipating, and people are becoming more upfront and not afraid to share what they experienced.
Now, with most literature on near-death experiences, it touches base on like historical or religious, philosophical, scientific, aspects of this phenomenon. But your book kind of goes into more like a spiritual type aspect of it. What do you think sets yours apart besides that? Do you think it's more like people, what's the word I'm looking for, maybe connect with your side of the book than more, scientific, or?
Well, many people have written, of course, on their own individual experience, but very few books have actually collected hundreds of NDE accounts and try to distill common messaging out of it, out of all of these accounts. Many of them approach it from a religious perspective. There are many Christian authors who claim that they communicated with Jesus Christ, and I don't discount those reports, and some connect with a Buddha-like figure or the Prophet Muhammad. But I did try to consciously separate religion from spirituality. But I'd like to share with you one chapter that I've entitled Potpourri. And I collected together about a dozen or so quotations that address that issue. And many of the NDEers said that after their experience, they felt less religious or less inclined to be part of organized religion. And they felt much more spiritual. They claim that it really wasn't necessary, although it made good. If it resonates with your heart, you can approach God through religion. But they said religion wasn't necessary to have a very direct, close, and intimate relationship with God. And that was a consistent message. And I think that's important because many of the NDEers reportedly were atheist or agnostic before their experience, and they now claim that they have certain knowledge and proof that an afterlife exists and that God exists, that God is alive and well, and wants to share with humanity greater wisdom, greater divine knowledge. I think we're on the cusp or threshold of a new age of enlightenment in which much greater divine knowledge is being shared with humanity. And I think we sorely need it at this point in history.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Now, we actually had a guest on. He's from the UK, David Ditchfield, and I use him as an example a lot. He came on and talked about his near-death experience. He was actually drugged by a train. His coat got stuck in the door of a train, and he was drugged, and he, lived to tell us about it. When he had his near-death experience, from what I recollect, is I don't know if he actually saw any kind of religious person or anything like that. It was more colors or things that were maybe not from around here. He couldn't just, exactly say what it was, but it was more colors. I don't remember him saying anything about a tunnel. A lot of people talk about a white light, but it was more like humanoid figures that were there. And when he came to, he, was going through some bad things, bad times, whatever, and he came to, and now he has, done music for different things over there, and he's now drawing and painting like an artist and everything, things that he never did prior to that. Did you come about some of those kind of stories when you were doing your research?
Indeed. Two examples. One NDEer claimed that once they returned to their body after their near-death experience, they wanted to read all they could about spiritual healing. They essentially became an intuitive. They could relate to people on a very deep and intimate basis. They could feel what the other person was feeling. They could tap into their feelings and emotions. And they pursued careers in spiritual healing. There was another NDEer who claimed that he had, after his NDE, a voracious appetite to read everything about the law of physics. Another one became an artist. Prior to the NDE, he had no interest whatsoever in art. But afterwards, after coming back, he wanted to pursue a career in art. And one of the things he related in his NDE was he was met with all sorts of different colors that he didn't recognize from his earthly existence. And the colors to him seemed alive. They were pulsating. And he brought that back with him and has now become quite a renowned artist.
Oh, wow.
So there are instances of that, and people become authors. They try to write about their experience, but they say that they can't convey the richness or the full meaning of what they experienced. As one NDEer said, it's a bit like trying to depict a beautiful or magnificent sunset by drawing in sand with a stick.
No,
it just can't be done.
Yeah. I mean, he did end up writing a book, which was completely, it was really good. He did a really good job at it, but, I just can't believe some of this. And then I had another guest on who was talking about near-death experiences, and they had, I think, one that they had, I don't know if it was somebody they talked to or researched on, but they were able to talk about something they had seen on the roof or whatever of the hospital or something, and then there was somebody there who could actually be like, oh my gosh, that actually is there. Like, seeing things around their, seeing what's actually happening to them if they are in a hospital having a near-death experience.
Yes.
Is truly phenomenal, because you think that once you're in that state, you think that there's nothing going on here, but I think we still have a conscience, that we can still sense some things that maybe it's our, I don't know if it's our spirit in us. A lot of people say that we're just, a body here, just something to hold that, and then we kind of diverse ourselves out into the universe, if that makes any sense. I'm trying to put it all together, but sometimes my mind goes all over the place. But I just don't know if they have figured that out yet. Like when we're having one of those near-death experiences, they think everything is shutting down, but how can we tell them that something that's actually happening to us at that time, and somebody is there to verify that actually happened? Like,
I do have a case. It wasn't contained in the NDE or the EANS archives, Allison, but there is a reported case of Pam Reynolds. I don't know whether you've heard of it, but she had a brain aneurysm or an aneurysm at the back of her neck, and she needed emergency surgery to save her life. And she was operated on for some 9 hours by about 12 medical staff, and she was in a deep state of unconsciousness. And at one point, the doctors actually had to stop her heart from beating.
Wow.
And she was unconscious, or her heart stopped. She had no clinical signs for a matter of minutes. And after the operation, and after she was talking to the main surgeon, she described in meticulous detail how she was looking down at her body and all of the medical team. She could describe in meticulous detail the nature of the surgical instruments being used. She was blindfolded, earplugs, in a deep state of anesthesia, and there was no way that she would have any way of knowing these things.
Right.
So that is a classic case of proving that we are much more than our physical bodies.
Oh, yeah.
As a famous French philosopher, Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, once observed, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And that describes the pure essence of the near-death experience. We have what you call a spirit, a life force, a soul or consciousness. I call it a soul consciousness. I hyphenate it.
Yes, I was just going to talk about that in chapter 5.
Okay.
Yeah.
It is eternal. It is infinite. During our earthly existence, it is trapped in our body, in our physical body. But when physical death occurs, as one NDEer said, the heavenly umbilical cord is severed, and the soul consciousness is released from the physical body. It then enters the world of spirit. And according to the NDEers, it immediately attains elevated awareness and expanded consciousness. And it thinks the soul consciousness is equivalent to mind, feelings, and emotions at the deepest level of existence. The soul consciousness is who we truly are, who and what we truly are. And in the world of spirit, the mind thinks more lucidly and is open to higher and varying levels of all knowing.
Once, let me go to this real quick. Here I go. Sorry, everybody, we're having some technical difficulty.
Okay, I can hear.
Yay!
I can hear you now.
Okay.
Yes.
We have a big storm rolling through, so I think the connection is kind of going a little bit. So we've been getting a lot of snow the last couple days. So
we're due for another 10 inches.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
We're
in the 90s here in Perth.
Oh my
Oh,
gosh.
we're heading
I'm
that way.
hopping on a plane and taking that 14, 15 hour, 20 hour flight.
We're heading that way. Definitely.
At least we don't have to shovel snow.
I know. Oh my gosh, I was out there doing that the other day. Oh my gosh. Anyways, I was asking, so I read the book and I was going, it's been a while, so I was refreshing my memory, but did you touch base on like a shared death experience in yours as well? In your book?
No, that never came up, Allison,
Okay.
not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Like I said, I read it a little bit ago, and I've read like 4 books in the last 3 weeks. So I didn't know, because we've also had somebody on that's talked about that too. So now, when I kind of touched on this a little bit, and you started to talk about our soul and consciousness, but do you think when we die, does it end, or does it become a soul or spirit, or what are your thoughts on that? Like, what do you think happens when we actually physically leave this world? Do you think we leave an imprint?
Yes. Allison, I can't articulate my own views. I'm simply the mouthpiece for the NDEers here.
Yeah, that's good.
But the soul consciousness, according to the NDE messaging, is eternal. It never dies. So they all say that humans misunderstand death. Our physical body dies, but when our soul consciousness departs the body, we leave behind all of our pain and suffering, all of our worry and anxiety. We leave behind our earthly identity. We leave behind all that we consider important in this world, our material wealth, fame and power. And when we enter the world of spirit, we realize that everything is oneness. Everything is interconnected. As one NDEer said, when I left my body, I left me behind. I left I behind, my ego. Everything was oneness. She said, I became everything, and everything was me. So it's an entirely different perspective in the world of spirit. In the earthly realm, we live in a realm of separation or separateness. We are all separate from each other. We are separate from trees and from physical objects. But in the realm of spirit, everything is interconnected. We cannot perceive or appreciate that while we're in our physical bodies. But modern science is beginning to realize that. Research into particle theory and subatomic quantum physics identifies that everything is connected at the smallest subatomic level of existence. Every particle in the universe is connected with every other particle through the essence of God. As one NDEer said, God is love. She used an acronym, LOVE. Love, L standing for love, O for oneness, V for vibrations, and E for energy. And love, or the energy or essence of God, according to the NDEers, connects every particle in the universe, which is infinite and endless. So we don't appreciate that on planet Earth, but when we leave our physical bodies, according to the NDEers, we have that sense of appreciation.
Now, do you know anybody personally that's had a near-death experience?
No, I've never had one myself, and I don't know of anyone who has had a near-death experience. But as I've said, I've researched the EN's archives and listened to many documentaries on near-death experiences. I have no doubt that they are real. They are profoundly life-changing for the people who have experienced them. They come back as changed people. as one NDEer said, dream at night.
Mm-hmm.
We wake up in the morning and realize that our earthly waking consciousness is our reality. Our dreams were an illusion.
Mm-hmm.
But the NDEers say that in turn, after you've had a near-death experience, earthly life is the dream or illusion. And the ultimate reality is the world of spirit.
Mm-hmm.
And if you read Hindu scripture, they say the same thing,
Mm-hmm.
that the world is a dream or an illusion, and that Brahman, or the heavenly realms, is the only real thing. And they say that they 20, 30 years after their near-death experience, they can recall it just as vividly, just as accurately, and as much detail as if it happened yesterday.
Mm-hmm.
So who am I to question the credibility and the weight to be given to the near-death experience?
Right, yeah. Now, you got a lot of information from, I believe it was the International Association for Near-Death, right? Studies?
Yes.
Okay. That, I couldn't remember if that's where you found a lot of them. And there's like quite a few. Like you've probably, have you seen like over like 500 or something? Or there's at least over 500 on this website, or...
Well, there's
of accounts
many
that
more
you
than
know
that.
of? I mean, I'm sure there's more of that in the world, but maybe documented. Do you know exactly or roughly how many you think there might be? Or
Oh, that would be very difficult to answer, Allison. I know that I didn't run through all of the EAN's archive accounts.
Oh, yeah.
But after 500, I put my pen down.
I bet.
Because they all seem to be saying the same thing, and I wasn't getting any new material. So I thought, right, this is a good place to stop, because I think I have enough here to encapsulate in quite a good book. So after 500, I felt that I could give a really good and complete and accurate description of the NDE accounts.
Yeah. Have you come across any of them instead of having like, you know, a profound experience, like coming back and being spiritual, or, you know, taking a different direction in their work ethics or something, or picking up a new, like, you know, we said some became artists, you know, some became composers, things like that. Have you ever come across any that had like a negative experience from their near-death experience?
Yeah, that's a good question, Allison. There were, actually.
Mm-hmm.
I would estimate approximately 10% of the accounts that I read did have elements of negativity or negative energy in them. And because I was concentrating on the positive experiences and the positive energy, I didn't include too many of the negative experiences in my account. I think that could well be the topic for another book on this, either by myself or someone else. But as I recall, you could classify the negative experiences into 3 different types. One type is a sensory perception or negative energy experience, where the soul consciousness actually found itself in a hellish place, or was taken to a hellish place by a so-called being of light. And one instance I recall was that the soul consciousness, with its sight and hearing, was in a place of great pain and anguish, anger and fear. And it was cocooned in this light of God, or the being of light. And the being of light warned the soul consciousness, I brought you here for a purpose, but do not step from underneath the protection of my light, because if you do, you will never leave this place. Another example of a similar type of experience was that the soul consciousness found itself in a hellish place and could see a wall. And on the wall, there were humanoid figures stuck, almost like cemented, into the wall. And you could only see the arms and the faces. The torsos were embedded in the wall. And they were crying out in pain and anguish and fear and negative expressions. And that was very much negative energy coming through in a sensory way, through sight and hearing. Another way that the NDEers have described these negative experiences, it's almost like a state of mind. They describe it as being kept from the light of God, or an absence of the presence of the light or of God. And they describe it as a place of darkness, as a place of being alone, being away from the light. And a third type of classification that I would call it is a transitory or transition experience, where the soul consciousness, after leaving the body, is offered the opportunity to proceed down this dark black tunnel, or some call it a deep dark valley, towards the speck of light. But for some reason, they choose not to do so. They still have free will as a soul consciousness. So they either, as one NDE said, may not be able to accept the beauty of God, or either fear going down the tunnel, the dark tunnel, or they may be too attached to the earthly realm. They could be too attached to a former spouse, or children, or close friends, or the home that they've just departed, or something precious, a precious chattel, or painting, or whatever. And they choose to remain in this earthly sphere. And here in the West, we would call it an earthbound spirit, or a ghost. In Asia, they might call it a hungry ghost. But those are the three types of negative experiences that I recall. But in fairness, I wasn't really concentrating on the dark experiences. I was looking at the experiences of light and positivity. But there definitely were negative experiences.
Yes, I was surprised to see that too, because I had read a couple of them where they had a more negative experience than a positive experience. And one of them, this was a while ago, so I don't remember exactly, but I do remember, I think one was like a priest who actually had a negative aspect, like he was being drugged down to hell. And I'm like, that was very interesting to me, but
yes.
I couldn't believe that, but I was like, oh wow. But I mean, I'm glad that he came out with that, because you just, like I said, in the last couple of years or so, I've heard more about near-death experiences. A lot of people kept it bottled up, so I'd like to see that more people are coming out with it, but you don't hear so much about the negative ones.
If I can jump in here, Allison, while I think of it, that may well be significant for that priest, because everything happens for a reason. According to the NDEers, that's a very strong and consistent message, that everything happens for a higher purpose, even though we cannot appreciate it or realize it at the time. But in the fullness of time, this will come out. And as one angel said, beauty comes of all things. All of these things are designed to happen to us to further our spiritual evolution. This is for the information and the edification of the soul consciousness. It's a very long and arduous journey, and these things do happen for a reason. but they happen because the soul consciousness must learn these things and progress slowly but inexorably to the higher realms of existence.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm just looking through here. We do have a couple questions in chat. So I'm going to go ahead and ask those here. Let me get to it here. Okay, so Kim's got them pulled up on her phone. Very good. All right, so Darren would like to know, what is the longest near-death experience on record? I'm assuming maybe how long they were gone for?
Well,
that you maybe know?
That is a very good question. Unfortunately, in terms of your listener's question, they didn't, none of the NDEers in the written account assess the amount of time they were out of their physical bodies. But of course it does vary. And in fact, I do recall that a significant number of NDEers wrote pages and pages, almost like a book chapter, on their near-death experience. So I think that's consistent with the proposition that they were out of their body and at the veil for a very, very long time to receive all of that infused messaging. And there is a proposition amongst NDE researchers that the longer you are out of your body and perhaps clinically dead, the deeper will be your experience and your life review, your so-called life review, and the more vivid it will be when you come back to your earthly body and recount it. So that's the best I can do on that question, I'm afraid.
That's okay. No worries. No worries. Well, he's got another question for you here, it looks like. He's wondering, how many near-death experiences do you think one person could have?
I did read accounts of the same person having numerous.
Oh, wow.
I can't recall, perhaps 2 or 3.
Oh,
And they, as I recall, this is going back a long time, but they weren't necessarily of the same type or nature. So it's kind of like a cumulative experience. But there are instances, relatively few I might add, but there are instances of the same person having one NDE and then maybe 10 years later, through circumstances, having another NDE. And they've written about it, but relatively rarely. Yes.
Gotcha. Now, if somebody wants to purchase your book, where can they do this? Where can we find it? I know it's on. I'm sure it's on Amazon and at Collective Ink Books. Probably Barnes and Noble.
Yes, Barnes & Noble, Amazon USA since January 1st, Kindle. My publisher, Zero Books, www.zerobooks.com. Barnes & Noble, Hive, Indie, and I think most online booksellers will have it.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, just if you type it in, I'm sure anybody can find it. Do you have any kind of website? Like if we have some listeners that listen, later, because we have them all over the world, is there any way that if they have any more questions or anything that they could, where they could find you? Like, do you have social media, a website?
Oh, I'm quite happy, Allison, if they wanted to email me.
Sure.
I'm always open to email queries. dchodson53@gmail.com. But my book attempts to answer life's larger existential and metaphysical questions that we all worry about from time to time. Does God exist? Does heaven exist? Or are there multiple heavens? Is there an afterlife? And if so, what form does that take? What is it like in the higher spiritual realms?
Oh, yes.
What is the meaning to our life on earth? Why are we here? what meaning is there to our earthly existence? And when we depart this world, are we judged on a reward-punishment basis? Or is it something else like a so-called life review? Are we alone in the universe? Is humanity alone? Or are there countless other universes, realms, dimensions of existence of vast complexity, some of which actually interact with the earthly realm? My book, as a mouthpiece of over 500 NDEers, answers all of those questions. And hopefully some of your readers will be interested in finding out the answers to those questions, because we've hardly scratched the surface today in the interview. But there's much more that they want to convey as their messaging.
Oh, yes, for sure. And I just wanted to get that out there so that way our listeners know where they can find you. But I do know that, when I was reading your book, you did talk about the different realms and things like that. If you want to kind of expand on that and see if any of our listeners have any questions from that.
Okay. Well, if you follow the Abrahamic religions, most believers will think that there's only one heaven. But actually, Islam and Jainism from India, two religions which recognize multiple heavens. Islam recognizes 7 heavens, and Jainism describes it as a series of ascending heavens, one on top of each other. And one of the NDEers came out right and asserted that the light told me that there's more than one heaven. There are multiple heavens. And when I read that, I just about fell over, because that's what I've learned from my interest in researching comparative religion. And actually, Dr. Eben Alexander, in his book, Proof of Heaven, A Neurosurgeon's Journey into the Afterlife, he also implies the same thing. He refers to the core, and he refers to the gateway to the core. So that could be consistent with a series of graduated or ascending heavens. It's almost like graduating from school. We graduate from primary school and enter high school, and ultimately university. And it could be the same experience for the soul consciousness. After multiple incarnations in the earthly and other physical realms, we slowly graduate up into the higher realms. And I think there is some plausibility in this experience, both from studying comparative religious scripture and the NDE accounts.
Very nice, very nice. Oh, I thought I heard Kim say something. Sorry, I think she just coughed. She kind of sits over here in the quiet, and she helps me scan through the feed in case there's any questions. Now, we just talked about different realms, but do you believe that there's other beings in this world besides us?
I definitely do. Yes. When summarizing the NDE accounts for the purposes of my book, I tried to separate my own beliefs from what was being conveyed by the NDE messaging, and tried to remain objective and not to identify any of the NDEers, to follow the typical research protocols.
Right.
But much of what I read in the NDE accounts I have found in my study of comparative religion. I wrote a book previous to this called Transcendental Spirituality, Wisdom, and Virtue, and I compared the religious scriptures of some 12 mainstream religions, both from the East and the West. And very much of the messaging which I read on the EANS archives can be found in the sacred scripture of these religions. And I got so excited about that that I have written my next book, which is to be released in August of this year.
Oh, wow.
It's
You've been busy.
I have. I have so much to relate on behalf of the NDEers. It's called Near-Death Experiences in Sacred Scripture, the Parallel Messaging. So it kind of draws everything together. It closes the loop on this. And I think, as I said, we're on the cusp of a new age of enlightenment for humanity, in which religion, the near-death experience, and messaging and medical research and scientific research converge. It's really an exciting time, and I'm glad to be part of it, and I'm sure you're part of it as a podcaster.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Like I said, I mean, we had somebody on who shared their personal near-death experience. We've had another researcher, and he's a professor, who shared he shared his shared death experience. So I mean, there's different aspects of it, and there's more and more people coming out with it. And I'm glad that we also talked about the negative aspect. You don't see that as much. You want to, look more at the positive, but there are those people that do have the negative ones. And Kim is showing me right now. We have another question in chat here, so so they want to know if there are multiple heavens. Does that go the same for hell? Is there different hells?
Well, this is an educated guess on my part, but I probably would think there is. Based on my limited reading of the negative experiences, there would be different levels of hell. The Catholics, of course, believe in purgatory, and then there's outright hell. And the NDE experiences I read, the ones that had a lot of negative energy and darkness, imply to me that there would be such a thing, but that's simply my educated guess. But I should say, Alison, that I wouldn't be discouraged if listeners have had a negative NDE. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That's not to be feared. Fear is a negative energy, and it's to be avoided. That would have been for the enlightenment of the soul, to tell the soul something that it needed to know, not to intimidate or frighten or scare them. God is not of fear, is not of retribution or condemnation or punishment. God is God of unconditional love and compassion. And this is for a higher purpose.
That's very well put. Kim, do you have is there any other questions in chat before we start to kind of wrap things up here? Our connection keeps kind of going in and out a little bit. Like I said, we have this big snowstorm coming in, so
It's supposed to start about 8 o'clock, so yeah.
Yeah, so if there's any other questions, I know there's a little bit of delay. Feel free to put them into the chat here shortly, and we'll get to them if we can. Like I said, I'm going to post email address. Do you have any social media? Are you on any Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, anything
No,
like
I'm not,
that? No?
Alison.
Okay.
No, that's a deliberate choice. I
Sure,
stick to email,
That's
but
fine.
I'm quite happy and open to receiving email inquiries from your listeners.
Perfect.
And I'll do my best to support them and to answer their questions. Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And I'm going to post that, if you're okay with me posting it in our chat, so that way if somebody pops in is reading the show, maybe if they look at the chats, they can see it there, but we'll also post it on our social media as well. And then everybody, please go check out his book, Douglas's book, Spiritual Revelations Beyond the Veil, and what we can learn from near-death experiences. Go check it out. You can find it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, anywhere you can buy a book. If you like to go to the libraries, maybe you can find it at the library. You never know. So make sure to check it out. It is a good book. It has a lot of information in there for you, and especially if you're wanting to know, what may happen to us in an afterlife, or if you you never know if you're going to have your own near-death experience. Maybe once you do, maybe this will enlighten you, or maybe if something happens to you, this will make you feel more at ease. So please go check it out. And thank you, Douglas, for joining us tonight. Or I should say tomorrow. It's Friday for you already.
Yes, indeed.
Not quite the weekend for us.
No. Good luck with the snowstorm, Allison.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, because
Stay safe.
What did we get? Like 10, 12, 13 inches?
Some places
Just a couple days ago. Already. Now we're supposed to get about another 10 inches.
Well, I lived my first 30 years of my life in Canada, so I know what snowstorms are all about.
You do know
But since moving to Australia, I haven't had to shovel any snow.
Lucky duck, that's what I'm saying. We're gonna hop on a plane. Thank you everybody who was in chat, and thank you everybody who was not in chat but listening. Like I said, we appreciate each and every one of you. We have some other awesome shows coming up in the lineup, so make sure you check out our pages for that information. And once again, thank you, Douglas, for being on. And please go check out his book. Like I said, Spiritual Revelations from Beyond the Veil. Go check it out. Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever you can find a book. I'm sure you can find it there. And like I said, we'll post it on our social media as well. If you're having issues finding it, you can always contact us. Or I will provide his email address as well. So if you have any extra questions or anything like that, please feel free to reach out to Douglas as well. And thank you so much for being on again.
Yes. Just one final point, Allison.
Sure, yeah.
I did write my book for those who have had an NDE to validate and corroborate their experience. So hopefully they will find it useful.
Very nice. Yes. And hopefully, yes, this will help them as well. No, never mind. That's an old question. I thought I saw another one pop up, but that's one I just answered. So thank you, everybody, and peace out.
Thank you, Allison. Been an absolute pleasure.
Yes, absolutely.